Hey everyone, it's Nissa. Today we're going to be talking about summary and quotation, two methods of source integration that will be useful for you as you approach the second essay unit, the summary critique. So let's take a look at these two methods. So what are summary and quotation? For this part, you're welcome to follow along with me on the screen in the video, or if you'd prefer to follow along on your own screen in your Word documents, please go to the course website and open up the Purdue OWL chart, and we'll focus strictly on the summary and quotation parts of the chart. So the first method we're going to discuss is summary. So what is a summary? Summary is taking the main ideas from a source and putting them into your own words. It's much shorter than the original source, significantly shorter, and it only provides a broad overview of the source material. An example of this is, for instance, when a friend asks you what kind of a movie something is. When they say, "What is this movie about?" you don't go through and detail all the characters or all the plot twists and turns for your friend. Instead, you give them just enough information so that they can understand the main idea of the movie. And this is the essence of a summary, is to just only get the main idea from the source. So then the summary also avoids giving unnecessary details when the main point is all you need. An example of maybe when you would want to summarize a source is if you're writing an English for academic purposes essay and you find a source that talks about an idea that you want to elaborate on. Maybe the article is a scientific article with a methods section and a results section, and while you want to tell your reader about the findings, about what the article found, what they researched, you don't necessarily need to tell them about the methods or the lit review or the introduction. You would not include all those details. Instead, you would just get to the meat of the article and really tell them the main point. And this is one of the purposes for a summary, is to just get the main point. So how would you summarize? Well, first you want to read your source you're going to summarize very, very carefully. You want to make sure that you have a really good understanding of the article before you start summarizing. So that's step one. Then I recommend you take some notes to identify the main points. Then put aside the original source and write down the main points of the article in paragraph form from your memory or from your notes. The reason I suggest you put the original source aside is that it gets quite tempting when you're like, what was that part about so-and-so? And you go and you check the original article and then you write that down. When really in a summary, the idea is to find the main points. And in fact, you should probably remember the main points of the article if you're going to include them in a summary. If you can't remember some of the smaller details, that's probably a good indication that you don't need to include them in your summary. So this is why this is a general rule of thumb. Whatever you can remember from your memory is likely going to point you in the direction of what the major points were of the article. Also, don't feel as if you need to use the same organizational structure that the source used. Because this is your paper that you're working on, you need to decide what the main points were that are relevant to the current piece of writing that you're working on. So even if the source included some information before they introduced the main point that you want to use, don't feel obligated that you need to use all those points as well. Just pick and choose what's relevant for your paper. In terms of documentation, this is going to rely primarily on the citation style that you're using. Page numbers may or may not be required. This is something that you're going to want to look for when you decide which citation style that you're using. For ESL 501 Online, we're using APA. So if you have any questions about when you would or would not need to use a page number, look for some information on APA. And of course, we always recommend the Purdue OWL for more information on APA. And of course, we'll discuss this more throughout the semester. Quoting. This is the second method we're going to discuss in this lesson. So what is quoting? This is probably the method with which you're the most familiar. Quoting is a direct quote taken word for word from the source. It's usually a very small section of the original source. You might take a couple sentences, maybe you take a small phrase. If you find yourself wanting to take more than a paragraph from the original source, start to ask yourself if you really need to quote all of that information. Is really everything you're quoting there really, really important? The reason we quote is for two reasons. One is to provide credibility for what you're saying by quoting an authority. If you have a quote from an authority attesting some claim that you're making in your paper, it can allow you to use that authority to add weight to your claim, to make it so that claim has more validity in your argument. The other reason we'll quote is when how something was said is as significant as what was said. For example, if you have the Martin Luther King Jr. speech, the I Have a Dream speech, the quote, I have a dream, has significance on its own. The way it was said has significance just as much as what was said. If I were to paraphrase the I have a dream speech into, I had an image when I was sleeping, that's probably not going to hold the same weight as if you were to just quote, I have a dream. So when how an author says something is as significant as what they said, maybe they use special wording or unique phrasing, or maybe they come up with a new vocabulary word, some piece of jargon, some new term that they're arguing in favor of. That's the sort of stuff that you definitely want to be quoting. But don't automatically decide to quote off the bat. It may not be necessary for you to quote off the bat. In fact, quoting should probably be one of the last methods that you use. First decide, can I summarize this? Can I just give the main idea? Maybe you want to give some more specific details, in which case maybe you want to paraphrase. However, if it's the wording that you want, the specific phrasing that you're after, then quoting is likely going to be the best method for you to use. So how do we quote? Well, we copy the writer's words exactly. If you omit words within a sentence, which you're allowed to do, if you have a sentence that you want to use, but maybe not all of the words are as important as the other ones, you can use 3 dots to show the words that you omitted. And we'll have an example of this later in the presentation. If you want to omit an entire sentence, you'll use 4 dots. Say you have three sentences that you have, and the second sentence maybe isn't as important. You could delete that and in its place use 4 dots. Or if you add a word for clarity, you can enclose it in brackets. So for example, if an author that you're quoting says she or it or they or that, something very vague referring back to information that was new in the paragraph, but you're not using the part that actually says what that is, you can replace the vague parts with something more specific, but then of course you want to use brackets to show that that was not in the original quote, that that's something that you added. In terms of documentation, how do we document a quote? Well, we use quotation marks. That's probably the easiest part of this, is when we see quotes, we know that the material that's quoted was borrowed from someone else. You'll want to provide the speaker or the author's first and last name, the position they hold, the authority they have. The President of the United States, Barack Obama, said. That would be his position. And then also, if it's necessary or if it helps support the quote, you can provide the source he or she was quoted in, if it's different from what from how you're including it. And also, again, similar to summary, in terms of documentation, some citation styles require that the page number be included for a direct quote. So this is something, again, you'll want to consult the documentation style that you're using. So decide with APA whether you need to include a page number or not. So what is a summary? These are some of the basic points that you should remember about summary. So it's shorter in length than the original work, uses your own words to re-articulate the main points of an original work. It omits smaller details, lesser supporting points of an original work. It's a means of incorporating the main ideas of a paper or publication that are relevant to your work. And the last thing I want to talk about is its objective. This is something that wasn't in the chart, but a summary does not use evaluative language. We discussed evaluative language in the first unit of this course with the diagnostic. But when we say it's objective, I don't say, this great film did this, this wonderful book did this. A summary is an objective piece of writing that does not put the author's opinion into it, but merely tries to restate what the argument was. Stick to the facts, don't critique it just yet. The summary is not subjective, so it's objective or subjective. A summary is objective. So for this next exercise, you're going to go to YouTube, type in Alma, or type in the following link to your web browser. Also have a piece of paper and a pen ready. I know some of you like to work in Word documents, but you're going to want to use your computer screen to watch the video. So have a piece of paper and a pen ready so that you can take some notes on the video because you're going to be asked to discuss it a little later.